all your background. I don't want
No,
to
no,
watch
this is
that
good.
now.
Don't change. It's all right.
Okay.
Keep this. It's
Okay,
okay.
because this is
No,
me,
no, you don't
actually,
need to
if you can see it.
You are the last person who should conform. You should not.
Okay, thank you.
This is so beautiful, really.
Thank you.
Morning, Sumit. Good morning, Julia.
Morning.
Juliana, looking nice. Jacket. Very good.
Yeah, Sumit. Thanks.
Very nice.
Hi, Juliana. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Sangeeta. Good morning.
Okay, you have exactly 2 more minutes
2 more
to
minutes.
start the music. Do we have the others who have joined or not yet?
Yeah, hey Sumit, I've joined. Usha.
Oh, how are you,
Hi,
ma'am?
Usha.
I'm
How are you?
good.
Good seeing you. Good, good.
Hi, Usha.
Good evening,
Hi,
Usha.
Sarah. How are you doing?
Everyone's there.
Hey. Good morning, Sarah. Hi, Usha.
Hi.
Hi, Seema. Very good morning.
Okay, 1 more minute to go. Let's have fun. Has Miss Seema Kumar joined?
Yes, she has, Sumit.
Hi, my name is Ishita Mili. I'm a Bengali American choreographer and the artistic director of Image Dance, a genre blurring American dance company that uses elements of Indian classical, hip hop, folk dance, and street styles to navigate social constructs. I like to challenge who in society gets power and why, because it affects my daily life. I think that the lack of gender equity is passed down in our histories, in the stories that we tell, and that affects how we raise our children, the opportunities for success that the future generation have. The first piece that you'll see is called You'll Find a Way, and it looks at the way that men watch women and judge how they behave as if it's their conditioned right. What if a woman has had enough and speaks out? Enjoy.
Good morning and good evening to everyone. I'm Sumit Ganguly and wanted to wish all of my colleagues one of the best days, International Women's Day. And I start the day remembering my mother. She's 93 years old, living in Bangalore. And I must share with you that I almost feel privileged that for the last 8 months, because of work, I get to go to India every month and don't share it with anyone else. But the highlight of that is I spend a few hours a weekend with my mother, and that is the highlight of the trip that I make to India. So much as people feel that I'm doing extensive amount of travel, the secret is that being able to spend hours with my mother, who has a very ripe sense of sarcastic humor, is absolutely worth the 16 to 18 hours a day travel. So again, welcome all of you. And before I begin, want to really welcome the leaders who have found it in their hearts to make the time for us and use this platform. Ms. Usha Shrikant, the Vice President, multiple sectors of IBM. We've had the privilege of getting to speak with her. She is amongst us as someone from Chennai, someone from Bangalore, was at TCS, was at Capgemini, and then has had a meteoric rise at IBM, which speaks extensively about her and IBM. We have Sarah Diamond. If I may, I consider her as among my close friends now. She's an advisor to me. She's an advisor to GS Lab Gabs, and her energy, her zeal and zest inspires me every day. And I genuinely seek to have a longer relationship with you, Sarah, and all humility want to learn from you, and GS Lab and Gabs is better off with your counsel and vision. Thank you. Seema Kumar has had a stellar career at Johnson & Johnson, and then took a major leap of faith, which she is known to be doing. And she's now the CEO of a very exciting company in healthcare for Cure. She was at the World Economic Forum, and she is a woman's leader at heart and professionally, and would love for her to expound on some of her views, values, and vision. And she has multiple facets to her, and we shall unfold that during the course of the discussion. And finally, Julia Zhao. Julia, again, is an inspiration to all of us. Again, may I count Julia as a dear friend. We've spent time in Delhi, in India, in Philadelphia. She's a wine sommelier. She is been rated by the iconic Express magazine as among the top 10 CIOs in the US. And when she is not working on technology, working on betterment of behavioral health through enabling technology, she's doing some small things like scaling a small mountain, the Everest. We had the privilege, many of us at GS Lab Gabs, and Sarah included, to listen to her photo essay on her scaling the Everest. It's not metaphorical, it's literal. And she did that in spite of multiple challenges, and she's agreed to share that with us. So once again, leaders, thank you so very much for doing this. I also have with me a dear friend and someone who's been with us for the last 10, 11 years, Juliana. Juliana is now one of our senior leaders in South Carolina, addressing some of the key clients of ours. And Juliana, again, has a great story. While she was pregnant and post-pregnancy, and she had my heart, she actually trained and certified for certain project management so that she's equipped to come back stronger after her child. So I feel very emotional whenever I talk about that. Of course, Sangeeta is our head of HR, and she is kind of leading a whole host of our initiatives. Rachna Sirohi. Rachna is, as I had said, a proud mother of 2 children in Pune. And while she's balancing them and looking after, she runs our HR at GS Lab. We also have Shomika, who's our marketing leader. So I'm amongst some very senior leaders, and it's GS Lab and GAVS is committed to be a unique company to try and be an enabler for women leaders. Unconscious bias and well-intentioned situations are one of the biggest challenges for organization, because I think women issue is an organizational issue. 41% of male still believe that women are more people-oriented while men are results-oriented. The same group of people also believe that women with children are not as focused as women without children. These are some unconscious biases that we need to work on. And when we hear from Usha, and that's now, you know, Usha, how strongly I felt when you were stating how you were balancing family and people, and you were unabashed about it. So that's what we really want to discuss. We want to break the biases. And again, I count myself among the group, including the Prime Minister of India, as he for she. And we genuinely believe that it is an organizational success that if we can be a leader among women as an organization, we are a stronger organization. And with that, may I invite Julia Zhao to share her story of the Everest. And for all of you, welcome and enjoy. Julia.
Thank you, Sumit. First of all, thank you, GS Lab and GAVS, for inviting me for this wonderful event and to be part of this panel with all these outstanding women. So first of all, I think most of you already know me, but for those who we met first time, hello and good morning, good evening. My name is Julia. So for last year, May 22nd, 2022, at 6:30 local time, I joking around saying that for 15 minutes, the top of my head is the tallest point of the whole planet Earth. And for wherever you are, I want to take you alongside with my journey to the top of the world. A lot of people ask me, why climb Everest? So a lot of people have different reasons, whether it's because it's the highest point, because it's the challenge. But for me, it's kind of personal. For a time being, starting about 8 years ago, I went through a very terrible personal time, I would say. Lost a job where I hold for about 7 years, went through a really terrible breakup. So I feel like the darkness, the sense of unhappiness surrounded to me. And I think I need to pull myself out as soon as I can. And I went through all these personal hardships in my life. And most of the time, I look for nature, look for the connection, look for the spiritual calling. And at that time is the time I feel the happiest. So I started hiking and started running, starting to do all kind of activities to get me out there and spiritually uplifting. And it's the mountain, actually, I find my peace and I find my passion. And I put some statistics over here, not to scare me, but just to let you know some of the facts are also very daunting when I make this decision. And people keep asking me, are you sure? Are you sure? Because this map shows that over 300 bodies still left on Everest and where their location is. And for every 10 people summited, Everest, only one woman. And for people my age, I would say for 200 people, every 200 people, only one person summited age 50 and above. So decision is made. And I was going through a very intensive training. And I think we met last International Women's Day, and I was in the midst of all these training regime. And basically for all 6 days a week, I put in about 20 to 24 hours of heavy training that include weekend back-to-back elevation about 3,000 meters, elevation gain with 50 pounds of backpack and all the kind of weight, heavy core training and trail running, as you can see over here, 20 kilometers with on the trails and on elevation. And some of the interesting encounters I put in just for the fun of it. So I ran over this rattlesnake on one hot day, and I wasn't paying attention. And he was actually having his meal, very, engaged in having a good time. But I was just trying to say, these are all the interesting facts and interesting journey that I have been going through while I was going to the top of the world. And while I was packing, I keep telling myself, this is a lot of gear, I flew 2 huge duffel bags of all the gear. The picture that you see, this is half of them. So when finally the day comes that I get on the airplane and fly to Kathmandu, and my team is waiting for me, and also my team leader here, which is the Sherpa, the guide, 2 guides. And I was actually made the expedition leader, and I met a team. It's a team of 7, including me. So these 2 are from Spain, 2 from India, 1 from Canada, and 1 from US. So we started to make our journey in Kathmandu. We did a little briefing, did a little acclimatization, some team building event, have some dinner, know each other a little better. And deep down, we know these are the people that we will be counting on to each other's safety. And these are the people that we will be working together towards a common goal. And everybody is very excited to start a journey. So we're starting the whole trip to fly to one of the most dangerous airports we call Lukla. So I think if you guys know a little bit of detailed information about Lukla located in the last resort of, I would say, the more civilized, accessible way through airplane aviation. And the airport is built in the midst of the mountain with the shortest runway of any airport in the world. So this is how we land in Lukla. And I want to show you a clip just to see how excited we are finally landed safely. I don't know the voice. Can you guys hear the voice? Not really?
We can, Julia.
You cannot hear the voice. Okay.
No.
Still not can hear the voice. Okay. All right. So this is how we landed in the airport, because it's a short runway, it's running uphill. And if you run a little bit longer without braking, it will hit the wall. So this is a very daunting experience. And once we land, sorry, the volume doesn't work very well. Everybody cheers and so happy, and finally we survived the first step of the journey. And then after that is the trekking began. So part of the whole expedition, the first part is trekking to Everest Base Camp. And this trekking is one of the most beautiful moments of the whole expedition. I actually enjoy every single minute of the whole journey because we met people from all over the world. For most people, trekking to Everest Base Camp is actually their bucket list, is their goal in their life. So we have so many interesting stories to share, and team has so much fun, as you can see. And everybody has a great time. And we have a great team building. We share a lot of personal stories along the way. We visit monastery and we have some acclimatization climbs to some of the local mountains, go past some beautiful rivers. And that's when I first had my first sight on Everest. And you can see the little top right here. I was very excited. And the wind blows all the clouds back to one side. And it's very, very famous. We call the Everest jet stream. And that's the first time I saw, wow, I'm going to end up there. And this picture is funny. I put it here because it's just something like simple life where you're, going through this amazing, pursuit to your goal. That's such a simple life, make you so happy. And this is where we have a hot chocolate at Dingbuchi, one of the villages along the way, which is elevation 4,400. We have our hot chocolate. It's one of the best hot chocolate I've ever had. And we had such a good time. We're so happy that we have an experience like that. And when we arrived at Everest Base Camp, that's when the expedition truly started. And Everest Base Camp, right now, since Everest become more and more commercial, as you can see, the climbers lounge, climbers tent we spend most time in is pretty fully equipped with food, with drinks at all time. Has charging station where we hopefully can get some news and connections from outside world. Has some Wi-Fi that you have to pay for, and also some TV that we can enjoy Netflix from time to time. And this is the base camp. I want to show you basically just surrounding area. And it has about 300 different companies, big or small, located in this big hub, international hub. And this is my tent. And this clip shows inside our climber lounge, everybody is waiting to, start with the dinner. So every single dinner, we start with the soup. So soup is one of the most popular dish in Everest Base Camp. It's easy, to swallow because of altitude. Sometimes you completely change your diet and also appetite. And it's warm and it gives you energy and calorie all at the same time without too much hassle. And these are the people, I would say, international hub of crazy people. That's we call base camp. I met all kind of amazing people. This Kami is one of my friends, and he actually summited Everest 26 times. And these are all excellent human beings. And this is Sanu Sherpa climbed all 8,000 meters 2 times. And this is the youngest climber in Pakistan. And these 3 Sherpa are on K2, one of the most famous movie we call Summit, if you guys have time to check it out. And the movie is about K2 expedition, which all these 3 Sherpa is included. You can see them talking actually in that movie. So these are all the famous climbers, famous Sherpas, and basically a lot of people who have the same kind of interest. And to other people, we're all crazy, but to ourselves, we're just one interesting human being to another. And in base camp, we did a lot of skill training, a lot of climbing, trying to go through, I would say, the ladders, climb ice, do some refreshing course, and just to make sure that on the mountain, when it truly comes as danger, the terrain, that we are safe. And so that's after the whole expedition, we will say in base camp, we spend the most of the time. It's almost like home away from home. And after that, we start with our acclimatization. And for every time before we go into the mountain to do anything, Sherpa have, we call a puja. So I think maybe the culture is similar in India. So the puja is we ask God, which is the God from Everest God, to allow us to get into the mountain, to take care of us, to be not too harsh on us. And we ask him to give us blessing. So this is part of the puja, which we do. And it actually takes a long time, almost over an hour. So we actually put our equipment in the shrine and get the equipment blessed as well. And we put a lot of offerings into our pocket. And when we are on the mountain, when things get tough, we threw those offerings out just for the peace of mind and saying, please, forgive me and please let me go. Please make it easier for me. So that's part of the puja process. And then the true acclimatization begins. So acclimatization is what we call climb high and sleep low. So we started with Camp 1, and to go to Camp 1, we're going to pass the most dangerous piece of terrain in Everest, which is Khumbu Icefall. As you can see in this picture, about this ladder, I think it's half a dozen to 8 or 10 ladders at different day of the time, because the Khumbu Icefall is moving. So we call the Khumbu doctors. They will make sure that for all these cracks, big cracks, crevasses, that there is a ladder going across. So going across those ladder is a very, I would say, daunting experience at the beginning. But since we do so many times, we have to cross Khumbu Icefall at least 4 times during the whole acclimatization plus summit push. And at later times, we actually enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. So the ladder is moving. They're not steady. So they're moving, and with the wind, and you feel like you hold on dear life with these 2 small little strings. And when you look down, people say, don't look down. And the first thing I did is to look down. And you see this gigantic blue ice at the deep, and you cannot see the bottom. And at that time, you take a deep breath and tell yourself, you can do this. You got this. And you have this self-talk at the beginning, but later on, it's actually, you enjoy it significantly. It's a lot of fun. And this comes
a bit
with
of time
challenges.
check, Julia.
Yes.
A bit of time check, yeah, please.
Okay. So this is the first challenge where I got an infection in a respiratory illness, and I got airlifted to Khumbu, to Kathmandu, and have antibiotics put through. And after 4 days, I come back and continue my journey. Challenge number 2 is when we do the summit push. From Camp 2 to Camp 3, we go through this big, we call Lhotse face, very steep, but due to a poor weather forecast that we cannot go through, we have to do it 2 times. So it takes a significant toll on my body and on basically everything. So the last piece is the summit push. So I was told the summit push is actually the most daunting experience in the whole expedition. It's the hardest of all. So when we finally reached to Camp 4 from the summit push day, and it's wind, it's storm, and I find out the tent is broken, the oxygen tank got stolen, and it's just a lot of things going wrong. And we have to get all our things together, borrow some oxygen tank, borrow some food, and start at 8 p.m. that day. And the whole summit push takes about 26 hours. And this is almost at the top to 500 meters below summit. And we call the Hillary Step. And going through Hillary Step, as most of you guys know, is scary. Not only scary, but also very dangerous experience, because it's a exposed area with a very slippery rock, and in between, while you're holding this skinny rope going across, and you have to encounter a dead body, you have to cross that dead body. But nonetheless, after 10 hours summit push, we see the sun comes out, a beautiful shade, a beautiful sunrise, and we reach the top, and I bring Gav's banner with me, and take everything, and make a good picture, stay about 15 minutes. And this is the clip from the summit, which this, as you can
Beautiful.
see, is me. And with my 2 Sherpa, which at the time, one Sherpa completely lost his voice and get sick. And down, when we make down, is actually one of the most dangerous time. And if I say anything is more dangerous, most people died on the mountain, they died on descending because you're exhausted, and that's happened to us. And because of a severe terrain too. So 10 hours, we did it without oxygen, without food, without water. And I actually running on negative energy, and I feel extremely tired. But nonetheless, we made it back. We celebrated with a lot of food, a lot of desserts, and a lot of parties. And, you know, I want to say this experience transformed me from, you know, going through a setback in life to excel and to get on top of Everest, to become one of the few women who finally made it. And I think the journey defined yourself, not the top. And it's not you conquered the mountain, it's you actually conquered yourself. So thank you.
Julia, sincere thanks. I mean, it is, I'm hearing this second time, the video, audiovisual, but I still get goosebumps. And you were
Thank you.
particularly very, very lucid today. So thank you. Thank you very much. And would love for you to talk about this more as we speak. Why don't we now invite the panelists together, and would love for Usha to start with. As we said, we wanted to hear from all of you, you the person, your early years, what defined you, some seminal moments, which were transformational moments. And we could spend a little time, all of you, on that. So it'll be nice to have all of you together, and maybe we can start with Usha and then go to Seema and Sarah and then Julia. Usha?
Hi, Sumit. Am I audible?
Very much, very
Oh.
much.
Okay. You will have to keep a time check because
No problem.
of us,
No
you're going to
problem.
ask us to talk. We're going to get all passionate about it.
And
So
that's exactly it. And please.
Okay, so just by way of introduction, I run the global offshore delivery for IBM, where whatever we work, we deliver from India on the consulting side. It's a range of services traversing across 950 odd clients, 11 locations now and still counting, and interesting days as you keep planning by the minute rather than have a strategy for the full year. I think if I look back, right, I was, and I'm going to tell a few things, Sarah, maybe you didn't know about it earlier, but
I'm all ears.
I grew up in a conservative family, and the joke in my friend circle is I did my engineering, I did my MBA, all of those regular things, but I would always keep telling my friends, you know what, I'm not in it for a professional career. I'm going to work for a few years and then chill. And my friends often tease me saying, 27 years and you're still working and we've all retired. So what's wrong with you, right? So that's how I grew up, where I had a lot of passion.
And this was in Chennai, Usha? This was in Chennai?
This was in
right?
Chennai, Mumbai, Kolkata, because my dad was a banker. So I went wherever he went, which I think was a good thing because I met different kinds of people, learned to adapt and move along. So what I would say is I didn't, really plan my life to go in a particular way, because in my growing years, my first aspiration was to be a newsreader. And for those of you who are in, who were or who are still in India, you would all, the older generation will remember the black and white TVs and Doordarshan. And I used to really like those newsreaders. And I said, and my dad would say, what's wrong with you? Why
Salma Sultan and Niti Reddy.
Then I said, okay, I want to be an IAS officer. I want to be a doctor. And finally, I ended up as an engineer. So it evolved as it went along. But the only thing that stuck to me was being passionate about what I wanted to do. And that's what was important for me in my growing years. And once I started working, I think it was important for me in order to keep something core to my positioning. And I still remember a conversation I had with Sarah when she was in IBM, and she said, how do you handle all the structuring and restructuring that goes on? And I told her, listen, the clients are the same. We can structure and restructure ourselves, but the clients and the value we deliver to our clients is the same. And I stuck to banking as an area for a long, long time, until about 3 years back when I said, I can, kind of do other things. So that was important in my career as I evolved, where I said, I need to be known. I need to be building value for my clients in a particular area rather than do anything and everything. So if I look back at my career, I've changed jobs, I've changed roles. But if you ask me what is constant, it's been serving the clients in the banking industry. That's what I would sum up, Sumit.
And 20,000 people, right, Usha? 20,000 people rolling up to you in some way?
No, 65,000 people.
65, that's right, 65,000. I just want to put that perspective for people, and we're so proud of what you've done. And what is interesting for all my colleagues, that you've done it like us. You have been a software programmer at TCS, at Capgemini, and now here. So it is very, very much a doable thing. And that's why the relatable thing is very important. Would love to jump to you, Seema. You again have a fascinating background in communications and in pharma, life sciences, genomics. If you would care to talk about that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sumit, and thank you, to Gav's Lab and to you all for this extraordinary panel. And Julia, my God, I also got goosebumps towards the end, especially when you said it's the journey, not the summit that actually defines you. So thank you. I'm looking forward to this panel. So I grew up in India, and I'm Madrasi, meaning I'm a Tamilian, but we grew up in Mumbai because my dad was stationed there. And two things I remember from the very young age, when we used to see Diwali firecrackers up in the sky. My father would explain physics, sound and light, and why you would hear the sound later after the light went off. And so from the very young age, I loved physics and science. My father was a scientist. My mother is a storyteller, and both of them loved music. So I grew up, loving physics, loving storytelling, but at the same time, as a young girl, I would watch around me that women actually were not equal citizens and in society. And so that sort of, stayed with me for a very long time, and I began to write about it. So while I was doing my studies in physics, I was also writing. And so then at some point I realized that, there's two different tracks for me. I came to the United States to pursue further education. And my last year of undergraduate degree, it was like you had to make a choice. Should I go the science route, or should I go the social science writing route? And ultimately, it was my husband who actually told me, you don't have to choose. And so I did interdisciplinary studies. And then, and here we are. And I've worked at Johns Hopkins, NIH, MIT, Johnson & Johnson, and now at Cure. And the thing that has always struck with me is that science is very important, and I'm still very passionate about science, but it only draws its meaning and its content and its context from actually interacting with society. So that has been the thing that I have done throughout my life. Had the privilege of working on the Human Genome Project with some extraordinary leaders, and there I learned that no one single person or organization can do it alone. It takes a whole community to do this. So what defines me, I think, is the fact that innovation, and throughout my life, I've discovered this comes at the intersection of disciplines, sectors, diversity of ideas, people. And that's why I love being CEO of Cure, because it's a very interdisciplinary focus. And then the second is differences. Celebrate your difference. The fact that you're different actually makes you unique and makes you stand out. So it's not that it's something to be ashamed of that you're different. It's actually something to be celebrated and can define you. And finally, a sense of purpose. So as even the young girl in India who was growing up and, watching, women not have the same status as men, today that grown old woman is still the same Seema, who is a very much, cares about women's empowerment. And that's why it's wonderful today. Happy International Women's Day to everybody.
Lovely. Seema, why don't you tell them a little bit about that boardroom experience and how you changed and pivoted? That'd be lovely for people to hear.
Yes, so I was in Europe and I was walking into a room and not knowing what to expect. And as I walked in, I looked and everybody turned around and looked at me. And it was pretty much every single person there was a white male, mostly blonde. And they all turned around and looked at me. And here I am, and they're all very tall. I am this petite young woman who has, come in to say something on me. And I had one of two choices. One was to just pretty much, wish that the ground would just open up and swallow me because it was a tense moment. But the other was, okay, I've got everybody's attention now. Speak your voice. And so that's my one big lesson I learned is when everybody's looking at you because you're different and that you're not what they expected, that is the moment to actually seize the day and speak your voice and use your voice. So that's, been through throughout my entire life. I have then just sort of taken that lesson and used it.
Thank you, Seema. And what is interesting is all four of you hail from a very different background, with Julia in a shore town of Dalian, China, Sarah in UK, and you all over India, so Seema. But this commonality of taking on adversity and leveraging and promoting your difference and using it to your advantage has been a common theme that I have seen when Sangeeta and Shomika and Rachana and I have been speaking with all of you. So, and again, Sarah, if you could now talk about your background and your coming to America, which was a little different than Eddie Murphy's coming to America. But
yeah, first of all, I too have to say, Julia, I heard your story once, but listening to it again, it's just amazing. It really is. Yeah. And you're an inspiration for all of us. Everything I think I'm going to say is very modest and inconsequential by comparison.
And if I may, Sarah, and for Julia, for all of the people hearing, she actually was down with pneumonia.
Yeah.
She was airlifted to Kathmandu. The doctors suggested that she should stop it. What she forgot to add because of the time check was weather was rapidly changing. So she had a very, very narrow window, and every day the narrow, and yet she said, pump me with as much of antibiotics, and she came back. As my Spanish housekeepers say, she's crazy.
Yes, pretty crazy. Yes, certified.
So first of all, thanks for inviting me, and it's great to be back virtually with many of the women and male colleagues that I had the chance to meet when I was in India at the end of last year. Sumit, when you asked us to think about our early years and what defined us, I went to three parts of my early years, and I want to say one thing before I go into that. One of the things I've realized is when you're a long way through your career, I'm not at the end of my career, but I'm a long way through it, and you tell people what you've done, it sounds like it's all planned. And it's what I've decided is called the rear view mirror effect. And it can be quite intimidating and overwhelming for people to hear. The truth of the matter is there are very few people I've come across who really plan their careers, even their life choices. It's actually amazing. A lot of it happens from instinct and from a point I think Usha made very well, just taking advantage of opportunities that come their way. And so I want to put a context around everything that I'm going to say. There were no great plans, but I think looking back, there was a fair amount of courage at different points in terms of taking advantage of opportunities, some personal and some professional. I think the three experiences I had, and even choices I made early in my life. One, and we've talked about this a lot, is education. I was very fortunate to be the recipient of a great education. I shared with Sumit last week, some of this again is serendipity. My mother, who was born in London and lived in the East End of London, which is not a wealthy part of London at all, and her parents evacuated from the center of London during the bombing that went on in London during the Second World War and moved out to a suburb where the bombing wasn't as intense. She was a child. She went to the local school. Well, the local school happened to be the first school that was founded in England to educate women, not to take them into the classroom, but to truly educate them and set them up to go to university. And so my mother, with a father and mother who hadn't probably done more than, sixth grade at school, ended up having a great education. And then, of course, she had that ambition for her two daughters. I have a sister. And then that led to being trained to expect to get the best education that I could have, which led me to my undergraduate degree in England. And then I actually came to the States to do postgraduate work. Looking back, the content of that education was irrelevant to what I do today in one sense, because it was all humanities, history and international relations. In another sense, it gave me the best foundation I could have had in terms of learning how to frame problems, how to really think rigorously, how to be hopefully clear and very precise and thoughtful in my communication, how to juggle lots of different priorities. And also, I think, understanding and thinking about context. The subjects I studied really made me think about context, people, cultures, the economic conditions that we're in. And if you think about what we are all doing, me through financial services and technology, those are really important principles that I think I've taken with me. And the reason why I say that is because continuous learning is what we all have to do, because the content matter is regularly changing and the velocity with which it's changing now is greater than before. Second thing I would say, and you sort of preempted it, is this instinct, and it was an instinct, about coming to the States. And I can't really put my finger on when it happened. I did actually come to the States and do some very unglamorous Greyhound bus traveling before I went to college. I did my graduate studies here, as I said. And then when I went back to England to start working, because I didn't have a visa to stay here and work, I made a very deliberate choice to join an American organization. And that was because I'd first been turned down at every job I'd gone after in banking. And it was very clear to me that women at that time were not being given equal opportunities. And I had this sense that in a US bank, I'd get a greater opportunity. So I worked with them in London, and then they fortunately relocated me to New York about 5 years later. So one of the things I've treasured about the culture here is we all come from different backgrounds, different ethnicity, different social backgrounds, economic backgrounds, gender. And I would have said this with confidence until recently, the differences are celebrated. I think we're at a pivot point where the differences are not always celebrated anymore. And that's why it's hugely important that we have a very great deal of consciousness about that. And then last, but by no means least, in terms of what helped shape me, he would say it was his choice of partner. I would say it was my choice of partner. But, if we look at it, all of us have one or two people in our lives, and if for me, it's my husband, who really have been there for us and have advocated for us. We met at graduate school. We didn't get married for some years and later. He always encouraged me. He had more confidence in what I could do than I had, still does. He never questioned that I would have a career and that it would be as important as his. We traded off sometimes. We can talk about that later. And he was a wonderful father because we have 2 grown children and he played an enormous part in raising them. And, you know, family and partners have always kept me grounded when at times work issues have felt overwhelming. And so I think having that balance and having one or two people in your life that can really be there for you, whoever they are, is tremendously important. And for me, it's been seminal.
So Sarah, again, that's a great story. When you joined IBM from KPMG, your son quipped and he kind of was a little, I think that would be an interesting, that leap of faith where.
Yeah, you have such a great memory, Sumit. I didn't want to tell the story because I thought I told it last year, but I will remind everybody. So, you know how they say out of the mouth of babes? Well, my son was probably about 7. And I told him I was going to join IBM. And the first thing he said to me was, "But Mom, you know nothing about computers." And he was absolutely right. I didn't. I'd worked in banking, but I had no experience with technology. Now, again, this point about giving into your gut, it was becoming so clear to me, and this was also analytical, that Anusha was ahead of me in this. You know, banking without technology wasn't going to go anywhere. Technology was going to lead where banking went. And so the fact that IBM around technology to serve the banks was hugely compelling. I was very intimidated by the size of IBM. You know, I went from, yes, it was KPMG, so it wasn't a nothing company, but it was small. And you go into this company that at the time was 370,000 people, and you think, how can you have impact? And my learning there was and remains, be known for something. And my value proposition wasn't my technology expertise, which I grew, but it was that I really understood the banking industry and I had, you know, very important client relationships. And that got me to the table because people wanted to learn from that.
Why I do this is because 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege of attending a reception SEMA in Philadelphia by Jamie Dimon, Mr. Jamie Dimon. And I asked him the same question, that how did you prepare yourself for life, for what you have become? And he is someone, he says it the way it is. And what he said was something that all of you are saying, and Julia, you were saying when you were preparing for the Everest, that you don't need to know everything. And that's something that I'd like to tell often my women colleagues. Like Juliana, when she decided to come to the US, we were debating between Tampa and Columbia. There was a lot of uncertainty. And I think being able to handle uncertainty is also a very important thing. And I think growing up, if I may, in India, since a large number of my colleagues are in India, we tend to, right, Usha, tend to be, and more my women colleagues tend to want too much of, if I am not sure of the unknown, I kind of step back. While very often people who just do not think too much go forward. And if I will, before I go to you, Julia, since you remind me of that, there's an interesting story. A bee SEMA is, again, very methodical insect. So if you take a bottle and have a transparent bottom and have it opaque all around and put it by the window, a bee will identify that the source of light is coming from the base of the bottle, and it'll constantly go and hit the base of the bottle and eventually die. But if you put a fly in there, a fly doesn't really understand too much of order. It'll go buzz and suddenly find the way of the opening of the bottle and coming out. One common theme that I often would like to share, and I want, and Julia represents that addressing the unknown and conquering the unknown, I think is a very important thing that a lot of colleagues can hear from you, Julia. And how did that start growing up in China?
Thank you, Sumit. And first of all, thank you, everybody. And Usha, your story is inspiring. Seema, Sarah, you guys all living amazing lives. And, you know, we all have our individuality and living your amazing lives, and you are all my source of inspiration. So I would say, you know, growing up, now I understand, you know, the power is the skill sets that you have. the knowledge that you have. But there's another factor which is equally important is multiplier. The multiplier, which is the soft skills, the resiliency, the self-discipline, as well as the time where Sumi mentioned, you go with the flow, you find a solution along the way. These are the multiplier. They can make your power double and triple and quadruple. So growing up in China, you know, in Dalian, which is a not very, very small part of international port in China, you know, I connect nature since I was very, very little. So I was very, very happy every single time I jump in the ocean. We spend a whole day there with friends and, you know, sometimes even till dark. And this deep connection with ocean make me very humble, you know, at the time, you know, you not only see all these different creatures, how they survive and how they thrive and doing amazing things and different form of life, you just have tons of respect and open mind too. You know, you're not the best. And this open mind carried me throughout the lives. And this is one of my huge passion with nature that, you know, not just only the mountain, but also the ocean, that this deep connection transform me in as a human being, to be open-minded, to always have thoughts of smart alternatives, because you will not be knowing everything with blind spot most often of the time. And second thing is I grew up in parents, both professor in university, one of the best university in China. And I was often taught of, you know, how technology, how knowledge is your power and how we can learn things and to make a difference, how a lot of things, what seems impossible become possible just because we can have a different innovative way of doing it. And the smart minds and of a kind, and make me so much of respect of technology and want myself keep ahead of all these new trends, new technology, new information, new way of doing things, and keep not settling on just average, even good, but striking for greatness. So these two defines me when I was little and throughout my life. And I know that everybody here has their own story. And I remember when I first come to US 30 years ago, working 3 jobs to get my degrees, and you know, it's a very difficult time. And I was thinking one time, I remember I sit in front of the public library in New York and doesn't have a place to live at that night. And I had to find a place because it's getting dark. So at that time, I really think, you know, I come here by myself, you know, as a Chinese immigrant, and try to make the ends meet. Look around New York, it looks so hostile to me. And 30 years after I came back to New York, a completely different feeling, you know, running a organization, the technology division, the CIO, and coming back to East Coast and feeling, well, after all these 30 years, I pulled this off, such a success story. So the early stage define me and make me who I am, and also along the way, all these multipliers that I develop along the way and make me who I am too.
Very nice. And for Julia, her mother used the ocean as her daycare. She
Right.
would just let Julia and her child go by the sea and just go off to work, because Dalian is a beautiful, beautiful, I've been there, the northeast of China, and very Japanese influence. Yeah. So
Right.
others may or may not know if she's mentioned, she's again a very higher level scuba diver. And outside of mountaineering, she just actually came back from Thailand. Julia, you want to talk a little bit about your Thailand experience and the...
Yes. So I was, you know, I feel like ocean is my second home. So since I grew up, so I wasn't have this intimidation when I jump in ocean, and I think that's have my father to thank for. That's how he taught me to swim at the age of 5. So you know, diving. Free dive, or at the time I was little, there's no other equipment. So we basically just dive and hold breath and see how deep we can go. And later on we use scuba diving, and with scuba diving, you can go much longer, much deeper, and see a lot more different things. And I loved it. And, you know, I love to learn new things and get certification. I collect a lot of certification. As Sumit mentioned, one of them is actually sommelier, which is completely irrelevant. So I become a rescue diver in the end. And, the beauty of surrounding by the fish, in thousands of fish, in Thailand, especially in the middle of this big fishbowl, all kind of fish, all sizes, all colors. And you can't even see through. That experience is out of this world. And for rest of the whole week, every time I close my eyes, I see fish. It's deeply engraved into my mind. And, look around and you just see, we are so small, we're just a part of this big, beautiful planet called Earth. And, let's make it a better place. And that's what we're trying to do here in every day of our life, and bring it back to career, is how we can make this place a better place. And being in behavioral health and in community behavioral health, our mission is to provide access to some of the best services to our members and become one of the best behavioral health organization. And, this is a very, very great task, great mission. And, we're every day striking for the best.
I'll come
That's
back to
yourself.
your passion for behavioral health and what you're doing. Let's go back to Seema. Seema, Indra Nooyi says this, that she very early in her life got to know, Usha, one or two of her core strengths. And every time she would go back to that core strength and use that. So my question to all of you is there a seminal moment in your lives, Usha, like you had mentioned, you wanted to be a TV news reader. Outside of the glamour part of it, there must be something that in you knew that you were a great communicator. Because even when we hear you, there is a very strong sense of gravitas that you emote. So same thing with you, Seema. Again, you were very strong in communication, and outside of as technology work that you have done, what comes across is your strong presence and your communication skills. So my question to all of you, any seminal moment in your life when you got to know that this is what I will be? And reason I ask is, I know, Sarah, you mentioned that maybe there's no grand plan, but I'm of the opinion very often we end up where we broadly want it to be, broadly. And I wanted to have you talk through that a little, a seminal moment that transformed and your core strength and how you parlaying it in your present work. We'll start with Seema and then Usha.
Yeah, I would say that to me, you're right, Sumit. I think that at some point, the journey has a purpose. It has a track. So even though it may not be one straight line and it meanders here and there, at the end of the day, the journey is sort of, it's not predefined, but you follow the journey because you have a sense of purpose. So for me, the sense of purpose was about making a difference in the world. And a lot of times people would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And many times people will say, I want to be the head of a company. I want to be a VP. I want to be a this or a that. But really, at the end of the day, it was not about the title. It was about making a difference in the world. And that's when I realized, working on many different things at Johnson & Johnson, but also at Johns Hopkins and NIH, and the Human Genome Project, where, it's like putting man on the moon. The Human Genome Project was the effort to map and sequence a whole human being. And so, to what Sarah was saying earlier about joining a big organization or a big effort, you're like, how is this ever going to get done? And what am I going to do to make a difference? But at the end of the day, you realize that when you're part of a big mission like that, that defines you and it gives you a sense of purpose. And so the stamina, shall I say, so one is the resilience, and the resilience is, you could be knocked down many, many, many times, but you never give up. You keep going. And that's what Julia was also talking about in Scaling the Mountain. It's that sort of not giving up and staying the long course. Second is like, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so, the ability to have that stamina to keep going and see it through the finish line, I think is the other piece of it. So I would say,
where did you get that from? Where did you get that from?
That's a great question. I think it's probably just growing up in India to some degree, where, you know, to Usha, what you were saying earlier, you grow up in India. It's a huge country. You grow up in a country where, you know, whether it's Doordarshan, black and white TV, or not having telephones. Most people didn't have telephones. And yet you think about, how are you, this little person, going to make a difference in this huge world or this huge planet? But I think you understand that by being different, by doing something that is unique, has a sense of purpose, it's not about you, it's about the thing you are after, you know, the better society, a better life for women, a better science and technology world. That is what keeps you going. If you just care about yourself, it's a very short journey. If you care about something bigger, it's a bigger journey. Curing disease, curing Alzheimer's, solving the human genome, you know, and making new drugs that will cure patients' lives. That's what keeps you going, because you can see the end goal, and the end goal is not your success. The end goal is something much bigger that's going to save millions of lives.
Very nice. See, there's a lovely quote by Bruce Barton that nothing splendid has been achieved by people who do not believe that something inside of them is superior to the circumstances that surround them. And I think that belief, I think IBM has that, Usha, right? That from the very beginning, that you were the best. And I think you will attract people with that similar belief system. And I think then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that goes along. So my question to you, Usha, is to talk a little bit about those seminal moments that defined you. But more important, I'll also bring in some prescriptive instructions for our colleagues. Where can they see, and what are some of the areas that they should look at? And we were very fascinated by your insights when we spoke with you for the pre-interview. If you can talk through that a little, and if you can talk to my women colleagues.
Thanks, Sumit. I think, you know, when I look back, different times, right? We all evolve as human beings. We all evolve as individuals. And if I just take a flashback, when I was in school, I was a reasonably good student, but I would always get the, for those of you from India, you have your ranking system, right? So I would be the third or the fourth. And when I was graduating out, I was second, and I was thrilled with my life. And the headmistress of the school was very close to me. I said, you know what, I made it. She said, what did you make? Yeah, I got the second rank, so I'm all good. She said, no, always aspire to be the first and not the second. It was a very casual, comment that was made. But then it stuck in my mind saying, I need to aspire. Whether I get there or not is different, but I always need to aspire to be the best, in which case I'm giving my best to what I'm doing. So that was one which kind of taught me saying, don't try to be an also ran, but you try to be the best, and then you settle down where it kind of comes in, right? So that was one which defined and made me think, irrespective of whether, because a lot of us as women, at least I used to lack confidence in my early years and say, can I be there? Can I not be there? And then somebody will pull me up and say, don't do your super hyper analysis, just go, take the role and start working. So that was one big thing for me. I think the second part I would say is it was my son. Now my son is married, working, and he's on his own. But when he was growing up, and I was in a consulting career, which meant you're probably traveling quite a bit. And I used to feel initially very guilty as a mother. And when he was, going to get out of school, I said, you know what? Don't you think I should quit and be there with you? His eyes popped up. He said, listen, that'll be the biggest mistake you can do. I like you. I'm very comfortable with you because of the way you treat me, and not like the other mothers who are seeing how many hours you're studying, etc. You don't know what value you add in terms of building my confidence. So just be yourself. If you're at home, believe me, my grades will be much lower than what it is. I think that brought out the fact that you don't need to be there everywhere, every time, but you need to be there with a wavelength where you are relating to people. I mean, one thing that I would call out, my son calls me as Usha. He doesn't call me as mom. And when he was
Wow.
growing, I said, you look at people around you, yeah, they're all calling their moms a mom. And you're like, hi, Usha. He says, listen, I look up to you as a friend and I would share. I think the relationship we built, I don't know whether it is right or wrong, but the relationship we built was as friends, to a point where he's always shared what he's going through, etc. And I wonder whether I would get that openness if I were, conventional, boxed stereotype, right? So some of these moments with my son actually opened me up in order to say, don't try to be that stereotype, be your natural self. And as long as people around you accept you for what you are, just keep going. That was another moment for me. I think the third one was discovering, like all of us, we all have our own strengths in terms of we're very good in domain technology. We're very good communicators, something else. But one thing one of my mentors told me struck very hard. He said, you know what, you've got one strength which not a lot of people have, which is about getting people together, handling a difficult conflict situation and coming out of it in a very calm manner. It's a strength which not a lot of people possess. So go for roles where you need to get people together. And when I look back, when I took this role, I was a little skeptical because I'd never handled, beyond 25 people because I was in consulting. But then
Not too many people have handled 65,000 people, Usha.
But when I moved to this role, I realized it was not so much about, did I know delivery? Did I know the 600 technologies we are working in? But it was more about ability to get people together, ability to handle difficult situations, issues. And that, I think, in a way, is very, very dear to me. And I think even in my personal life, it's kind of made me a better individual. And last but not the least, I think I do what I enjoy and I like doing. And that has gone a long way for me, whether it is personal or professional life, because whenever you're doing what you like, you don't feel bogged down. I think you don't, feel it's the end of the world. And that's what has kept me going all along. So if you let me go, I'll go on, but I think I should stop now.
No, please. I would like you to go on. And Usha, if you could also talk about, I really like the travel part with your husband. I think that would be also something my colleagues would love to know, and women leaders at large. How do you balance the business travel and home?
Yeah, so I don't believe in balance because moment you start thinking of balance, you get miserable, right? So one of the things I've always done, and I grew up in my early years where it needed a lot of travel. I was in sales and consulting. My husband was in sales, to a point where we will actually sync up. And one big thing about my husband, Sarah spoke about hers. I think he was very proud. He's always been proud, even today, in terms of saying, I've got a partner who is really focused and who's, making a difference, rather than saying, am I getting this perfect meal at home? I do cook well, by the way. So that's the thing which has gone. And in the beginning, as we would both travel and we both wanted to make a mark in our careers. And we had a kid early in our married life. And we actually had a schedule where a week I would go and the next week he was going. So we were, balancing it, not by, it was a planned thing that we need to do. And then there were times where we both took a call saying, you know what, these are roles I'm not going to be doing because we'll find it hard to balance. So, and that happens when you converse, when you talk to your family. It's just not about my husband. It's about my mom, my mother-in-law, although my mom is the only one who always felt in my early years I never focused on my family. And I had to say, I've got a brilliant family who believes I focus. So you should, not worry about it. But then this balancing and also speaking out, right? Saying, these are things I want to do, I like to do. And believe me, people start being proud of you. And that's what I've seen in my family all the time. And I've never had a point where, someone hasn't come in order to help me. And it's the entire ecosystem, by the way. There've been times my husband and I have a clash, then his mom or my mom would come to our rescue and say, I will handle. And that's how we've kind of built our lives around an ecosystem, which if you're living in India, it's an excellent family support system that you anyway have, right? So I think it's more about sharing. It's more about saying, hey, I'm not going to be there for everything, accepting that yourself first. And, we always say, we are prioritizing, we are sacrificing, blah, blah. I don't believe it's sacrifice. You probably missed that PTA at school because you really wanted to be in that presentation for the client and not because, you were thinking your job. So it's about your inner self. As long as you start, accepting that, I think everything will come. And believe me, guys, there is no balance. It's about toggling. And then sometimes it's home, sometimes it's family, sometimes it's you. I also go on my own holidays. I've got several interests that I pursue, although I'm nowhere near Julia. Julia, that's one in my bucket list. I don't believe I'll ever get there. But, it's about, revolving doors, and you do this today because you like, and always enjoy the moment and enjoy what you're doing is what I would call out.
This is
Sumit, can I
fantastic.
comment on that?
Yes, I want you to, Seema, please.
Usha, I think you said so many things that I think many of us have in common. First of all, you have to have fun doing what you're doing, because you have to wake up in the morning and look forward to what it is that you're doing. Second, I agree with you. All this, work-life balance, it's all hogwash, because,
it's a mirage. It's a mirage.
It's a mirage. It makes you think as though it's a zero-sum game, and it's not a zero-sum game. And, it's not that if you take some here, one day you may go to the PTA, another day you may end up going to travel. And, and the third thing that you said, which I think struck me, is this care infrastructure. And this is what Indra, when I was talking to Indra Nui, that's what she was talking about, this infrastructure, care infrastructure. And that is really important, because you talked about your husband being supportive, and, so I could share, I'm sure we all feel, and Sarah, you said something about that too, share the same thing. He's very proud of me. We figured it out. It's not like, why are you going on travel, when I don't have, anything to eat? Nothing like that at all. And it's funny that my son, just as you were saying, you sometimes don't think about people younger than you or your children being somebody who can be mentors or you can learn from. But I've learned a lot of things from my son, including him encouraging me to say, okay, take that leap. I think you're going to be a great CEO, and I think you're going to do a great job. And so, just having somebody young who can say that to you, I think is important. And so at the end of the day, it's that whole infrastructure, the care infrastructure, that ecosystem of support, not just support in terms of daycare or anything like that. You need that too, logistically, but this strength and the support in terms of encouragement. And many of us have talked about males. I don't know about all of you. Many of my mentors, at least early throughout, and people who just championed me were all males. So male ambassadors are also very important, in addition to having the women's support system.
Very nice. Thank you, Seema. Sarah, would you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Some of the prescriptions.
Yeah, I think you all have just made such important points. I'm going to come back to a seminal moment that actually occurred to me as we were talking now, and then build on some of the suggestions. So a seminal moment for me was, I mentioned I'd been working with an American bank in London, and I actually apparently was the first woman that they brought to the US, to New York. So I was in New York, which was like, this is where I want to work. I was working in their capital markets group, risk management. So it all seemed perfect. And I was really unhappy. And the reason why I was because there was zero collaboration. There was no teamwork. You were all on your own trying to work things out. My job was to work out risk management policies for new trading instruments the bank was going into. And I had come from a strong team environment, albeit I was the only woman on the team, but it was a strong team environment to this environment. So you'd have thought I'd arrived, and it took me a while to work out I had not arrived. I'd taken actually a personal step that had helped me in terms of my future life, which the bank didn't know about at the time. But in terms of an environment I was working in, it was not me. I flourish in an environment, I hope Usha would agree with this, that is collaborative. We go back a long way in case you hadn't realized, that is collaborative, where we support each other and we help each other. And part of what I get huge joy out of is feeling that I'm able to do that for other people and they do that with me, I hope. So the environment that you work in, which really comes to, yes, it's the purpose, and IBM has always been very, very focused on, I don't say being the best, Sumit, but I would say making a difference in the world. Sometimes they are the best and sometimes they're not, but making a difference in the world with the right values and integrity is core to who IBM is. And what I've realized is being in an environment like that is where I flourish and where I feel really rewarded. So to your point, Seema, I feel associated with a bigger purpose, but I don't necessarily think I'm going to make a difference, but I feel like I'm in an environment where all of our contributions collectively will make a difference. And it's an environment that encourages and welcomes collaboration and teamwork and support, doesn't not. So one message to everybody is, it's the environment you're working with, it's the values that are critical. And if at any point, it won't happen here, I'm sure, but else, in the future, you feel you're not there, recognize it, because you can't be successful if you don't feel in sync with the values and the purpose of an organization. If I sort of get more prescriptive a little bit and building on some of the things that I think Usha and Seema had said brilliantly. So it is a network. My husband and I never had the advantage of a family network. I mean, I've moved away from London. We started our family out west. His parents were much, much older and they were on the East Coast and not really able to help. But we built a network. We built a network through his community. He's a university professor. The university is a community. So we built a community that way. So you can always build and create a community to help you, even if you don't have family around you. And I think that was very important learning for us in terms of how to feel that we weren't alone, but we had created essentially a different family for ourselves. The network also is very important professionally for your careers. Now, I do a lot of coaching now with women, and one of the things that I would say is ubiquitous is they don't focus enough on building out their own professional networks. They work incredibly hard at their job, and then they feel incredibly responsible for their family commitments, be it parents, siblings, children, but they don't invest in their overall professional networking. And that is something that is invaluable, and you will learn from it hugely, and you will benefit your organization hugely. So it's not just a give to me, it's give to your organization too. With that then goes this whole notion of really making sure that you've got mentors and sponsors. And the two are very different. Mentors are there to help you, guide you, be a sounding board. But what also we tend to not think enough about is the sponsor is somebody who will really go advocate for you. And this is, again, what comes out. I haven't spoken to Indra Nooyi, but I read her book, which I love. And I think last year I recommend everybody read. You need sponsors. Sponsors are people who will actually go advocate for you, create opportunities for you, or if they're at a table and there are opportunities being discussed, say this is the right person and why. And I think the last thing, I could keep going, but I won't because of time, but I think the last thing I would say, and this was a learning that took me too long, is don't be afraid to ask for help. I think I grew up in a generation where, because there weren't a lot of women in the workforce, asking for help seemed like a weakness or a frailty. It was the client that actually made me realize that wasn't the case. And I'll tell you a really quick story. My daughter was doing chess championships always happened at the weekend. The client I was working with was doing a big acquisition. We had to do due diligence 24/7. I was going to miss her chess tournament. I was very torn about this. Someone said, just go and ask this. It was a small bank. Go and ask the CEO if he minds if you're not there. You know, as soon as I raised it with him, so of course you're going to go and watch your daughter participate. That was a big learning. And in today's environment, it is okay constructively to share the demands that you have to manage outside of work in work. Don't make it someone else's problem. It's your problem or your need, let's say that. But it's fine to share it. And Sumit, I know that you encourage that a lot.
Thank you. Julia, we'll have the last words from you. Few things. There's a lot of university connection. Julia has 2 sons from Harvard who are right now in South Africa, changing the world with some fascinating things. We have Sarah's husband, who's a professor at NYU. And again, Seema, very proud of your husband who's at Dartmouth. So thank you all. Julia.
Yeah. So basically, what I was trying to say is
Brown, sorry, not Dartmouth. My apologies. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yes.
No worries.
So what I was trying to say is Usha and Seema, even Sarah, we all have very, very similar stories talking about, kids and grow-ups, and even we are looking for some kind of help or support from our children. I think the balance of work and life, to me, I think a better word is a prioritization. So for a long time being that I prioritize kids a little bit over my career, because I think when they grow up, I need to spend most of my time to give them the tools and all the foundations to make a good judgment along the life. And I did most of my PTO time and homeschooling my 2 boys. And when they grow up, I keep thinking they're still my boys, give them guidance. And until, one fine day, they tell me, I'm already 18 years old, Mom, I'm a grown up, I'm a big boy, I'm a big, actually young man, you got to let me go and you got to let me make the judgment and all these choice decisions by myself. So I start to realize, oh my gosh, actually I can actually learn a lot of things from them. So after graduated from Harvard, they, went to work for some consulting firm, but ends up in Africa because they feel like making a difference, making bigger footprint and working in the things that they truly passionate about is a lot more enticing. So right now they in Cape Town and trying to work for startups and every single day, and they feel excited. And I think kids this age have a tremendous mission and very driven to make a huge difference. And I learn that from them every single day. And I think my son's favorite words always, when I talk to him about things, they always say, Mom, I got it under control. And that's it. And that's it. To me, it's a closed-end statement. You cannot continue with that. So you basically cannot say anything anymore. So, okay.
You just wish you had to, right? You just wish you had to.
Right. So carry that to, running a team, an organization right now in community behavioral health. I think, I need to give the team enough credit or trust them to make the sound judgment and even let them fail, sometimes, but give them enough faith and beliefs that they can do the best work given the information and the support that I will truly 100% want to support them to make that judgment and decision. And with an open mind and let them to do all these, making all these difference every single day. And at the same time, with diversity, inclusion, and equity these days, that running a team with an open mind, be a good listener. And it's very, very helpful to combine all these qualities. And as Sarah and Seema said, make a very safe environment for people who truly want to thrive, and especially women in many sense. It's not easy to be a modern day woman because they have a lot of other things going on in their lives. How to truly support them, hear them out, give them the support, access to opportunities and success, I think is everything every day that I, trying to learn and trying to improve. And with every environment, with all the learning availability to me and the support, I want to support all my team basically thrive and especially promote a safe environment for them to thrive.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Want to thank all of you, but I think Juliana will do a better job. So may I invite
Yeah,
Juliana
thank you so
to
much.
thank the panelists, Juliana.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sumit. And I don't have words. I'm able to relate to all of you individually. Usha, to your point, there's no balance. It cannot be, right? And to Seema's point, our male counterparts make a big, huge difference in our life. For me, my boss, I would call the kind of platform he's laid for me without even questioning me, right? And the belief he had on me is actually driving me. And especially when we have just one planet, right? It's like, it has to be equal. We don't have a planet B, right? And Julia, your point, never die attitude. I think everybody should embrace it. And Sarah, I really had the privilege to speak to you in person when you were here. And being honest and transparent, even with the customers, really makes a difference. So I think everybody should embrace that as well. So just keeping the time in mind, my sincere, heartfelt gratitude. Thank you to all of you for sharing your inspiring stories to all of us. Your insights and perspective enriched our understanding of the challenges faced by the women in this world and the critical role they play in shaping our society. Special thank you to all the attendees as well. And finally, before I close, I also want to reaffirm that GS Labs, GAVS have a commitment to promoting equity, enabling women and championing their rights. And as we celebrate this International Women's Day, let's continue to work together towards creating a world where women are valued, respected, and given equal opportunity to thrive. Happy International Women's Day, and thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
on
Thank
to
you.
you, Sangeeta, thank you.
Yeah.
And all of you, thank you so very much. We'll end it with a final dance recital by Ishita Milli. Again, very, very talented young lady from New York, New Jersey, who's been touring India as well. Sangeeta, thank you.
Yeah, sincere thanks to everyone. Wonderful session. I mean, so inspiring. Thank you.
Of the king. How long you think that you could keep up with my tempo? Dance to the